Thank you very much, Dr. Haripriya. Dr. Suhas has also joined us, so he'll go next after Dr. Suvira. But then Dr. Suvira is going to deal with a very significant and specific topic called hard cataracts and rock hard cataracts. As in the West, it is called cataracts and not cataracts. And so previously it was told that the phaco is not for cataracts. But now with the advanced technology and the techniques which we have, we can do them very, very safely, which she will demonstrate to all of us now.
Thank you. So when faced with the tough challenge of dealing with a rock-hard cataract, we need to have specific surgical strategies in place that actually help us suitably downsize them, emulsify them, and help us do it each and every time with a predictable outcome each time. So this is what you need to do. Preoperatively, we cannot but not include deciding how dense is the endonucleus. Is there any element of a polar element here, if you can see anything? Is the capsular bag stable? What is the status of pupillary dilatation? Because that tells you how large your rexus will be and how easy it will be for you to operate. What is the status of the corneal endothelium? You want to make sure that you have an adequate healthy endothelium to decide whether you can do a phaco safely in your hands. And of course, what is your working space? The pre-nucleotomy steps cannot be with any compromise at all. You want to save all your energy in actually downsizing these nuclei. So your incision cannot be too tight, too loose. You don't want fluctuating chambers because of weak incisions. You want to have a capsular rexus, which is about 5.5 millimeters. That would adequately cover your IOL completely. Plus, if you were to go too small on the size of your rexus, even accidentally, you tend to have an increased propensity of damage of your capsular bag because of injury either by the chopper or by the slightly excess mechanical separation that you do create when creating a chop here. And finally, when you come to the hydrodissection, you have to be slightly more gentle. I tend to be vigorous normally with my hydrodissection because you want to create that wave. But remember that with these rock-hard cataracts, you're working with a large endonucleus which is tightly, snugly fit into this capsular bag. So any overzealous, a very strong jet of fluid can break down the posterior capsule and cause a PC blowout. So slightly more gentle on that. However, the only thing that really matters, finally, in dealing with these rock-hard cataracts is how you actually break them down. So customizing the breakdown of these nuclei has got three things that you have to take care of. What is the modulation of power that you're going to use? What is the type of energy delivery system that you're going to use? Your instrumentation, and finally the technique. The one and only power modulation that I would recommend, which always works, is the burst mode. You can have continuous, you can have your pulse mode, the conventional with the 50-50 on-off, you can have hyperpulse. But what you really require in these hard cataracts is to be able to penetrate into the nucleus and get a good hold. With the burst mode, what you do in this mode is that it gives identical and specific bursts of energy. When we say identical and specific, we mean the length which denotes the power, and the duration, which is denoted by the width of the burst. And as you control your foot pedal and go lower and lower down, these bursts of energy are given closer apart, making eventually the gap between them really tiny. You work with a power commensurate with your grade of the cataract, 40, 50, 60, depending on your systems. A high vacuum, because today we want to use as much vacuum as opposed to power to actually emulsify the fragments, and work with a flow rate of about 28 to 30 cc. For the instrumentation, I would recommend that you actually save your newer tips for the harder cataracts. If you were to use your older tips, the amount of energy actually required to be delivered to emulsify them is almost 1.5 times. And certainly you do require a sharp chopper. And the technique that we used is phaco chop. It's the safest, most efficient, and the most physiological. Why most physiological? Just one point to add before I start on the videos. It is a crystalline lens. It's called crystalline because we have pre-existing fracture zones in these lenses. When you have a substance with pre-existing fracture zones, any tiny bit of shear force will actually cause a cleavage plane to appear quite easily and propagation of the crack. Therefore, phaco chop, nothing else. Coming on to the surgeries. Okay, where is the cursor? Yeah. So this is to just take you through the different grades of cataract and doing a good phaco chop and how it really works quite well. This is a grade 3 cataract. You impale, you fixate, and you mechanically subdivide. You're not wasting any energy in actually sculpting a groove. The energy is only delivered to impregnate into the fragment. Then the non-dominant hand has the advanced maneuver of actually creating the mechanical disassembly. Work your way. You may need to do a little more of a lateral separation to ensure that the posterior plate is also separated. As you can see here, the surgeon has broken the first heminucleus only into 3 fragments because they are larger nuclei. Another option, instead of doing a direct chop, could be sculpting a groove, trying to work your way slightly lower down and give you less of tissue to chop. So you work your way, making a groove wide enough, and then you go in, you impale, you fixate, and then create the mechanical disassembly. And as you can see in this video here, you've just cracked it in the upper half, but if you can see, it is auto-propagated, and almost most of the nucleus is now separated. Turn it around 180 degrees, break it down into 2 halves, and then further divide. As the grade of the cataract gets harder, you need to use more energy. You need to expose sometimes slightly more of the tip. And so you can see here, you need to use a longer chopper. So you work with a sharp chopper 1 to 1.5 millimeters and with significant ease. So the energy, the tip burying slightly deeper, and the mechanical chopper all work towards creating the perfect breakdown. So here again, the fragment broke, the nucleus broken into 3 halves, smaller, more emulsifiable fragments. And then again, once you've got your first chop, you actually can see. You have visibility. You know how safe is safe. That the following chops are quite easy. So you no longer rely on the visibility of tissues. And this is coming to a grade 5 cataract. Now you can see here, sometimes obviously a little more difficult to create the disassembly here, because as surgeon now impregnates here, the nucleus tends to break. Sometimes it turns, as you'll see in the following steps. See, this is a torque. The torque occurs because you've not impregnated deep enough. Once you're deep enough, so you can do a sequential chop. You go and hold, it doesn't crack, you go further deeper down and then create the disassembly. It's quite easy to go ahead. This is the amorphous core. The amorphous core, the central dense part which does not have pre-existing lens fibers, does not get involved in the chop, and you have to manage by emulsifying it, bringing it out, and then making room for yourself to work onto the posterior plate. And today, if I had to modify my technique, I do what is called a pulse chop, wherein I impale in a burst mode, I get a good hold, lift up the nucleus, ensure I have fixity, now put the chopper in, but slightly further away, and I give an extra burst or 2 of energy, moving both instruments towards each other. And when I do that in those very, very hard cataracts, I find it's easier to be able to facilitate a chop. It just kind of splits open. Plus, I'm not too concerned about using that little extra burst of energy because it is within the nuclear tissue itself. I do that for my following fragments as well. But having said that, that's when all goes well, but it doesn't always go so well because the posterior plates sometimes can be really tough and difficult to deal with. So here are a few videos of what do you do with the posterior plate. Now there's some way you're going to have to get by. You're going to have to separate them and emulsify them. So 1 second, where is it gone? Yeah. So when you're left with like a flower, you've got, can I just have a video, please?
He was running behind the PowerPoint.
So what?
Get off the PowerPoint.
Okay, doesn't matter. I'll just go to the.
Go to the video. He's running there already.
Oh, is it?
Minimize it.
Yeah.
All right. I'll just start again. It's edit 2, 1. Yeah, that's it. So. Okay, here you go. So suppose you're left with like a posterior plate, a thickened posterior plate. 1, you can use two dialers, preferably a 2-Sinskey hooks under adequate viscoelastic cover to create your mechanical disassembly. Make sure that your dialers don't up and through, it's going to end up eating up the posterior capsule. And often you find like this in the center, there's that part of the posterior plate that's just not separated. So somehow I try to just bring one of the fragments up, and when I've got that center part slightly further up, I just emulsify it. Here again, sometimes no matter what you do, your posterior plate just comes as one big plate all in itself up there. And the only thing you can really do here is under a lot of viscoelastic cover because you're working with quite a hard cataract. Within this space, you just suitably keep downsizing it on its way up and emulsifying it. Here's another case wherein you're left with it's like a grade 3 to 4 cataract, and you've tried to emulsify. I mean, surprisingly, when you're doing a chop, it appears to have separated fully. And when you start bringing the fragments out, you find that no, it isn't. So the surgeon tries mechanically to create a disassembly, break it down into 2 halves, but still it seems to be joined a little bit, in which case you just work your way on its way up, coming with pixelated here. And this central part that is joined together, you just either do a reverse chop with the second instrument, as I'm trying to do here, or you just give a few bursts of energy and break down that fragment and suitably then keep emulsifying one after the other. And this is what you just call a bad chop. The reason for this is inadequate exposure of the tip, not a very good tip, not adequate burial, and not a good chopper. So this is what you don't want, where you're just trying to struggle. The struggle can actually be done away with if you take all the previous points into consideration. You have to bury deep. This is not adequately deep enough, and therefore I have so much of a torque and so much of need for mechanical, yanking apart the fragments, which is what you do not actually require today. Coming on to my last video. And sometimes then, however, that is just a chop not happening too well. Edit 3, 1, okay, that's it. Sometimes not only does it not chop very well, but you may actually be faced with different issues. Okay. Now here the surgeon is a grade 3 to 4 brown cataract, VIP patient, and has had an accidental nick while doing the rexus, missed it, and while doing the hydrodissection notices that the entire rexus has ripped open. Now, in all sensibility, one should probably ideally just convert and do a decent small incision and get the nucleus out. But one dares to go ahead with the chop because you think that, okay, the tear is at around 11 o'clock and I'm going to chop around 5 or 6. So with great care, reduce your settings, reduce your flow rate, keep your power as much as you require, and a lower vacuum, you try and create the chop. You think you've done a decent job of creating the chop, then you eat up the endonucleus, and when you're trying to work your way at, when the surgeon's actually trying to work his way at getting up the fragments, now not only is it tough, but you ended up catching the iris there as well. And we all know that once you catch the iris, even if you put in the adequate dispersive viscoelastic, it can be a bit tricky in actually emulsifying these, the rest of the nucleus. And of course, you're working with a compromised bag. However, with great care, with adequate OVD cover, one actually managed to emulsify the entire nucleus. However, at the end of this case, though it's not shown here, there was a peripheral extension into the PC and an IOL was placed in the sulcus. Just one more? No, that's not the one. 1 minute more, that's okay. Just like to show you this video. Just a point to be noticed that you can have a subluxation at any point in a cataract. Okay, while emulsifying a rock hard cataract, everything seems to be going well, but the surgeon is actually struggling a little bit, and at some point here notices that the bag has come away, as you can see at 5 o'clock. Now, what do you do here? Now, if you do have an intraoperative subluxation in a hard cataract, remember, at any point it's quite safe, provided you don't have an opening in the PC or tear in the rexus that's gone behind. You put in adequate OVD, and you can then put in a CTR, either by a hand-on-hand, which is my preferred choice, and this is a fishtail maneuver wherein you can put the bump of it, the central part of it in first, and then get each of the loops to go into the bag. I prefer to do it through the 2.8 because I find that putting in the last bit of the CTR with the McPherson's is easier in my hands. Now, having done that, you've got a stable bag now. You have a stable bag, and it's quite safe to then go ahead with the rest of the surgery. And finally, the last 10-15 second clipping. This is a case where there is a PCR towards the end while bringing the last fragment out. One point I'd like to make is that it's However hard these fragments are, it's not very common to actually find the sharp ends of the fragment creating a PCR. I haven't found that to happen in my hands. I find, more importantly, it's an injury caused by either the tip or it's a hypermature cataract and you don't have a stable bag and your bag just jumps up and you catch it in your probe, or most importantly, could be a chopper injury. And even more importantly, it's probably during IA that it happens. Now here, it's happened during bringing out the last fragment. You put in a lot of OVD. There doesn't seem to be too much of tissue of vitreous disturbance. The section is enlarged to a 5 mm incision, and the surgeon just very carefully takes out all the fragments under adequate OVD cover, because you cannot use a vitrector to eat fragments, and you cannot use the fragments. You cannot safely use a phaco once you have an opening, after which a 3-piece IOL is quite so simply then put in the bag, and things were quite okay. With that, I come to the end of my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Suvira. It all looked very simple when Dr. Haripriya showed it, when she showed it, but situations have to be handled very gently because these are all not very easy situations. But then one point, in such a hard, when the bag is full with this hard nucleus, and if you have a rexus tear, it will be very, very dicey to continue with chopping and continuing with rotating the nucleus without this peripherally extending onto the capsule. Most of my BC have happened because of this, of the rexus tear extending onto the posterior capsule. So please look at them, please lift them up, chop outside the bag, stretch outside the bag, and take the pieces outside the bag and emulsify. Please do not stretch inside the bag, and because these kind of cataracts do need to be stretched and separated grossly. And even when Haripriya showed a double rexus after putting a capsule tension ring, please do not make a very large extension, because it is very easy, especially if it is the area where there is a gap between two eyelets of the CTR. If there is a gap there and if you are making a nick there, it's very easy when you try to pull, it just runs into the periphery and you lose the whole rexus. So please make it very small if you want to extend after placing a capsule tension ring. Over to Dr. Suhas Haltipurkar. He doesn't need any introduction, he's a veteran, and he is talking to us on high myopes and post-vitrectomized eyes.
Thank you, Dr. Meenu. Suvira, it was a very good talk she gave, and especially when you come after a stylish speaker, at least I get tongue-tied. So pardon me if I, miss up some of the words. Well, the talk is in two parts. One is post-vitrectomized eye and high myopia. First, I'll show some of the clippings on post-vitrectomized eye. Most often, if that post-vitrectomized eye is with silicone oil, there are different ways a silicone oil-filled eye will present. Like in this case, the eye is literally filled with silicone oil, but thanks to good quality viscoelastic like dispersing, if you have good control on the anterior chamber, you can safely push back all the silicone oil back into the place where it has come from. And if you are careful enough to ensure that you are operating on a positive, positively filled eye, you can safely prevent that silicone oil from coming into the AC. But not very often you will have that kind of silicone oil that would obey. Like in this case, again a post-vitrectomized eye. To start with, there is no silicone oil, and as you proceed, it comes. But when you have such solitary bubbles, they don't really matter, because you can safely proceed with your thing. But one thing is certain, that there are times in such cases you have to have some way by which you keep a positive pressure. Like in this case, I am using an AC maintainer, and the use of AC maintainer is especially important when you are changing over from phaco tip to IA, or when you are changing sites. And when it comes to putting a lens, it has to be a 3-piece lens. And for a 3-piece, I prefer to implant the lens in front of the AC, in front of the iris, and then gradually, tuck it into the bag, but make sure it's in the bag, because if you have a lens in the sulcus, there are chances of lens sliding or lens decentering very high. And at the end of it, you can always wash out the extra silicone. Now this is a very, very unusual case, but since it is also one of those post-vitrectomized eye, I thought of showing it because it's a very, very interesting case. Although I know it's an eye that is filled with silicone oil, and I also know that posterior capsular plaques are very common and you can do nothing about it. I just took a chance and tried to remove the plug, which obviously I cannot. Then I decided what will happen if I do a posterior capsulotomy, and to my luck, what happened is, you see here, that silicone oil anterior face is so much intact that all this procedure is happening under irrigation. I get a hold onto it. I start tearing it, and the silicone oil doesn't misbehave, and the face doesn't break. But I have very often discussed it with retinal surgeons. They are not able to explain why. But here I have a partially made posterior capsulotomy, and the silicone oil, is still, the face is intact, and I'm still in the irrigation. And then I don't want to go any further, so I just managed to cut it. And a 3-piece lens is kept in the sulcus, simply because, no, not in the sulcus, in the bag, of course. Just because it was related and very interesting, I thought I would share it with you, although not directly connected. Now, my main topic is about surgery in a myope, and I think there are a lot of things that we really need to look at. Very often, when you operate on a myope, the amount of turbulence and fluctuation in the anterior chamber that occurs, is it really okay for the posterior pole? Is it okay for the peripheral retina, which is not healthy? Considering all that, I think one has to give a special attention when it comes to operating on a myope, especially if that myope has a soft cataract. It doesn't really matter much in terms of nucleus management, but maintaining a good anterior chamber becomes very important. There are different ways in which you can maintain. This is the AC maintainer that we use, but one could have an intermittent AC maintainer as well, in which your irrigation works like an intermittent AC maintainer, where when you want to change from one side to another side, what you saw just now was the anterior capsular posterior surface that was polished, which I prefer to do for 2 reasons. One, you would definitely see, these are the people who may also have zonules which are not very strong, and if they get anterior capsular fibrosis, you tend to get some amount of capsular phimosis, which you can certainly avoid in a myope. And then the next thing is prophylactic use of endocapsular ring for whatever doubtful benefit it gives you. In this case, I put it for its benefit of stretching the posterior capsule and not for the PCO. When it stretches, it definitely prevents some of the folds that you get on the posterior capsule. And these are the cases where very often we put these single piece lenses, and these capsular bags are normally larger than normal size, and so the lens can be a little loose in that. So it does a dual function of stretching the posterior capsule, preventing the PC folds, and whatever little benefit it has of preventing the cells from coming in, and it occupies some amount in the bag, so the lens can snugly fit in. So these were some of the uses that some of these different steps that are used when it comes to doing high myo. And I thought these were some of the points I thought I would share with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for sticking to time. And we have one more last speaker, Dr. Matthew Kurian from Netherlands. He'll be telling us how to deal with soft ones. So we all know that we are getting more and more soft cataracts in these days, and it's very difficult to make mistakes in soft cataracts because their vision would be very good, pre-op itself, and there is no margin of error. So he will show us different ways of dealing with soft cataract, and I probably think he'll be showing his sign which he has published in JCRS recently while doing a soft cataract. Over to Dr. Matthew.
Thank you very much.
So in cases with silicone oil inside, you can get some aberrant reflexes also, if you would have noticed, because the silicone oil bubble moving in different directions when you move the eye, especially during rexes. You can see another needle moving in opposite direction when you are moving your needle, and you may get distracted many times. I have got distracted many times. Yeah, Matthew.
Okay, so in phacoemulsification, basics is very simple. You create segments and remove those segments. And the technique for creating segments 91, 92, 93, divide and conquer, stop and chop, primary chop, 94, Nagahara. And then after that, there has been hardly any big breakthroughs in technique of doing it. Removal of segments is always the same, irrespective of what is your method of removing, creating those segments. And the challenge in soft cataracts is basically creating the segments. Removing it is pretty easy. And in divide and conquer and stop and chop, you are trying to do some trenching and cracking. Stop and chop and primary chop, you are trying to do various techniques of chopping vertical or horizontal. In soft cataracts, when you are trying to do divide and conquer, the separation portion, cheese wiring happens, where the instrument just disappears into the material without splitting the material at the posterior plate. And in the gripping that is required for stop and chop to stabilize the nucleus, you are not able to get a good grip because you build up vacuum, that bit goes off. You build up little more vacuum, that bit goes off. And the next thing you know, you are holding the posterior capsule. So what happens? Basically, you end up with complications or you modify your technique. So let me just get into the video there. So you try to hold and then you end up with the rent. You can see that red glow there and there's a rent, the vitreous is coming forward. So how do you avoid that? Hydrodelineate, hydrodelineate, hydrodelineate. Okay. If you have a very soft cataract, it looks very easy. Don't get carried away. There are problems, challenges up the sleeve. Hydrodelineate multiple times. First golden ring, hydrodelineate again, second golden ring, and you can do a non-fragmentation technique, which is various methods are there. This is just some form of phacoaspiration. Phaco, somehow I call it. Okay. So as long as you just remember to remain in vacuum, don't get frustrated by the fact that the piece is not coming quick enough and accidentally go into foot position 3. You just stay there and build the vacuum. Don't let the pieces break off. It has to keep coming in one continuous sheet. The lamellar structure of the lens fiber in the back, actually each lamella will come as one plate after the other, and it's like a snake going into its hole. So you just need to be patient there. The other option is you can do divide and conquer. But the problem is you need to reduce the resistance of the posterior plate so much that you can, with very minimal separating force, you are able to create the crack. So as you go here, you can see that the posterior plate, in the red reflex, you can see the posterior Y suture. Okay, so that's how you do it. Okay, and you need to keep trenching till you reach that posterior plate, and the lens fibers in the bottom there are clearly visible. And I'm just showing this video, and it's, in the next few slides I will explain how it is arrived. So you have thinned out the posterior plate so much that you just go near, and with very minimal lateral separating pressure, you are able to create the crack. The amount of pressure you generate on the side walls is really minimal, and there is no chance of cheese firing. But that means you have to really thin out the posterior plate tremendously. And then after that, the nucleus fragmentation, the segment removal portion becomes very, very easy. So just go pick up the pieces one by one. Minimal bursts of phaco and more of aspiration. So it is ultrasound assisted aspiration. The third thing you can do is to again hydrodissect, hydrodelineate, and in soft cataracts, hydrodelineation is very important because it tells you beyond the golden ring, do not use phaco power, remain in ultrasound only. And this is called a mechanical chop, where just see the top right corner, CDE is 0 and remains at 0. You are basically working on phaco aspiration, no ultrasound. Okay, so mechanically support and stabilize the nucleus. The second instrument, doing horizontal chops, creates the separation. And the entire surgery can be completed like this. So when it is done very well, it looks nice, but there are things to remember on how to be able to achieve this thing predictably again and again. Okay, so how do we do that? The theory of getting this thing right again and again. Okay, so in conventional divide and conquer, you are doing 2 cruciate trenches, and the problem is that you can have a punch through, as you saw in the first bit of the video, and have an unrecognized PCR. The actual video in that goes on for another 3 minutes without the surgeon recognizing the right had happened. So this is because of the posterior capsule which gets upcurved, and your phaco tip has to move up along like that. The second thing is, as you go from the middle and go further towards the periphery, your foot pedal has to ease up using less and less power and less vacuum, so that you have to ease up your foot pedal in position 3. And the safer modification is what Gimbal described in 91, which is to do 4 proximal downslope trenches, where you have altered from just within the subincisional rexus margin, you go up to the center, which is demarcated by the Purkinje reflex. You don't need to be a genius to figure that out. So you just reach the thing, rotate 180 degrees, and then from the proximal again you reach up to the midpoint. Do not cross the midpoint, because uncertainty with regard to hand phaco tip position as well as foot pedal position is beyond the midpoint. Remaining in this proximal side only, you keep rotating the nucleus and achieve the trenches. So what you need to know is how long, how wide, and how deep. Since you are staying within the rexus margin, it is always smaller than the rexus. How wide? In soft cataract, it is going to be, because of the problem of cheese firing, you want as much nucleus material there. You want to remove as little as possible. So if you have a tip, you try to make it as narrow as that tip. Between a standard tip and a micro tip, use the micro tip. The thinner the tip, the less amount of nucleus you are removing in trenching, and so there is less chance of cheese firing subsequently. Hard cataract, obviously, you make it much wider. How deep? Conventionally, in all the books, you will say phaco tip 2 to 3 diameter depth. But PC, in a small young person, 40-year-old person with a thin nucleus and just a posterior subcapsular opacity, by the time you have reached your third trench, you may be trenching the anterior highlight. Okay. Next thing is red glow. Red glow and these guys are good to start with. How do you determine the difference? Okay, it's like when you're cooking, you say salt to taste. Okay, those who have cooked will realize that it's a very subjective thing. And what happens in situations where there's a vitreous hemorrhage or a posterior staphyloma where the red glow is altered? So in trenching, you create this trench, you want to put some lateral separating pressure which overcomes the resistance of the posterior plate. In thin, ideally your resistance offered by the posterior plate should be least, lateral separating pressure should be more, and the resistance offered by the trench side wall should be maximum. Then it will crack easily. Soft cataracts, this is not the case. What happens is lateral separating force is less, and the posterior plate resistance is also less. But the trench side wall is what offers the least resistance, and your instrument disappears into the material. Use on physics. So AIOC came up with this idea. He'll use a broad thing to divide. Okay, he's increased the area, so the force per area becomes less. Fantastic. Next thing you can do is reduce the allow space for cheese wiring by removing as little of the endonucleus as possible. And since we know that in the periphery it is softer, in a soft cataract you actually crack from the center rather than trying to crack from the periphery. So there is somewhat greater resistance and the chance of cheese wiring is lesser. Third thing is can you thin out the posterior plate predictably, and this is where my idea came in. If you have to reduce the posterior plate resistance, you have to bring it down as much as possible. The trade-off is that you improve your ease of cracking but have a risk of posterior capsule rupture now and then. But can you actually reduce this risk by a good clinical indicator? And this is where my paper in JCRS worked, which is basically as you start trenching, your first trench is from the cutting all the edges of the onion peel of the lens fiber orientation. So what you will see in the floor of the trench is actually these cross striations. And this is what you can see over here. So what you need to do is make your trench, increase magnification, increase brightness, move your fine focus up and down a little bit and see whether you are at this level, which is what I call as the superficial trench level. And this is useful in Brunner's and cataract for superficial chopping. If you go to the next level, you are cutting the proximal ones cross, but as you reach the center area, you see that you are along the lamella. Okay. So what you get is subincisionally, you are getting cross striations. More centrally, you are getting linear striations. Cross is well visible, linear striations not so easily visible, but again, adjust fine focus. This is the intermediate test trench, and this is where you want to impale when you are doing primary chopping. And in soft cataracts, the type of primary chop you will do is a horizontal chop. You need to go further if you are doing divide and conquer. As you keep going forward, what happens is you make your phaco tip more vertical, trench almost vertically down, and this is helped by the Kelman tips which are available today, because your subincisional vertical trenching along this vertical portion becomes much easier. So you do not see any cross striations now. What you see is basically the floor of the trench where you're seeing linear striations coming to the center. The cross striations are on the vertical wall. If you tilt the nucleus up, you can see the cross striations. And that is what, if you have a well-centered trench, you will see in the red glow the posterior Y suture also. So you get a perfect trench, then after that cracking becomes easy. You position your instrument deep, and distally if it is a more firm cataract, because you want to crack it from the weaker area. In a soft cataract, you want to crack it from the center. Do not violate any of the tissue landmarks by breaking them, and avoid creating a saucer. So chopping principles, basically you are exploiting the lens fibers, and this has been described in 94 by Nagahara. Vertical chop, this becomes difficult because the phaco has to grip and stabilize. So horizontal mechanical chopping is much easier. And once you have approximated the instruments, you have to create a lateral separation. Segment removal, start with the smallest, work in the safe zone, optimize the fluidic parameters, because this is phaco aspiration, aspiration mainly, assisted by a little bit of phaco power. And the second instrument can use a goalkeeper. Both the primary chop and the divide and conquer article came last year in 2013 in JCRS, and the interesting remark by one of the referees was that it's perhaps surprising that this has not been described before. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Matthew. I think we are right on time. we can take few questions for 1 or 2 minutes. All our speakers are right now here.
Okay, just one reminder, please fill up the feedback forms because it will hopefully help us to get a larger hall where so many people don't have to stand in the next year's conference. Thank you.
My question to Dr. He had told that he had put silicone IOL on the silicone oil. So is it...
I have one question.
No silicone oil, no silicone lens. That's a 3-piece
acrylic lens.
I filled with silicone oil and we have to remove cataract. So, and we want to remove oil also. So what should be done first? Should we remove oil or should we do cataract?
I normally do the cataracts first. Meaning, are you talking about the same sitting or do the same sitting? Then I will do cataract and then I will remove it. Because once the cataract is removed, then the case goes to the VR's department and then
So our setup with I do it first, and then the VR person is standing by. He just continue on the same bed and same the machine comes in. He does just continue.
So my question to Dr. Haldi Purvakar. Sir, is there, have you kept any axial length limit? You told me that you put a prophylactic CDR in myopic cases. So is there any guiding axial length limit you have kept? In which case to put that limit?
anyone with axial length more than 27.5, I put CDR.
Okay, if there are, then take a last question.
It would be up to about a little more, maybe even 8 clock hours, it's fine. You can use a double loop CONE there, use it to fix it on both the ends. It also depends on how loose the bag is. The bag is really loose, like a microspherofachia, or even with 8 clock hours, but a really loose bag, then I think you should remove it and place a suture lens. The CONEs will work well, because traumatics typically don't worsen. They are kind of a stationary subluxations. That CONEs will work well. Double CONEs will be better.
I think we'll come to the end of this. Thank you all the delegates for participating, and all our speakers did a great job sticking on to time. Thank you all the speakers, and thank you very much.
Now, a slit lamp is to an ophthalmologist what a fishing rod is to a fisherman. It allows us to fish for accurate information from the eye. Actually, it's a misnomer because slit is only one of the diaphragmatic openings there. So it is actually a misnomer when we say slit lamp. So like I said, gone are the days of torchlight examination and loop examination. We are essentially now seeing all our patients on the slit lamp. So what does the slit lamp give us? The slit lamp gives us a magnified cross-sectional view which is binocular. So the major advantage is the binocular view. It helps us to examine transparent structures, and we can at the same time do quantitative measurements such as intraocular pressure measurement. We can measure the pupil size, the disc size, the size of opacities. We know the anterior chamber depth. At the same time, it also gives us a qualitative evaluation. That is, we can even measure the relative depth. So if you look at the history, quick history, it was Devecker in 1863 way back who developed the portable ophthalmoscope with a monocular microscope. Then Albert and Greno in 1891 developed the binocular microscope with a stereoscopic view. But the actual credit of this oblique illumination slit lamp examination goes to Gullstrand, who in 1911 introduced the illumination system which had for the first time a slit diaphragm in it. And that was where things changed. Then, of course, there were further milestones. In 1925, Maus introduced the term biomicroscopy, defined it as an examination of the living eye by means of corneal microscope and a slit lamp. Lippmann, in 1950, incorporated the rotatory magnification system based on the principle of the Galilean telescope. So we are going to see all this today. So what are the parts of a slit lamp? When we talk about slit lamp, we are essentially dealing with 4 systems based on a composite mechanical arena. So it's the observation system of the microscope, the magnification system, the illumination system, and the mechanical system. So what is the observation system? The observation system is a compound microscope where there is an objective and an eyepiece. Objective which is of 22 diopters and an eyepiece of 10 diopters. It has a long working distance, and there is presence of a pair of prisms to re-invert the image, because we essentially have positive lenses, so we need prisms to invert the image. Then we come to the magnification system. Now this is a lot of this technical stuff here, but we'll try and make it as simple as possible. So the magnification system are of two types. There is one called as a Zassi scope with rotating objective, which is a older version. There are different objectives placed on a turret type of arrangement that allows them to be fairly rapidly changed during the examination. So your Haag Street models, the Bosch-Law model and the Thorpe models have this kind of a magnification system. And then came the Galilean telescoping principle. Here the magnification changer sits neatly between the objective and the eyepiece. It allows for more magnification steps. So there are 5 magnification steps on this turret arrangement. It utilizes the Galilean telescope with positive and negative lenses to alter the magnification. So the Zeiss, the Rodenstock, the American optical slit lamps, these have the Littmann Galilean telescope principle. Then we look at the illumination system. So the illumination system, this is a lot of physics here, but the illumination system again is of two types. The polar illumination principle, which essentially works on the basis of axial illumination, purely axial illumination. So we'll not go into the details of this. Just remember it works on axial illumination, the polar system. But the Gullstrand's illumination system has uses also mirrors. Besides the axial system, it uses also mirrors. Here the light source is essentially a halogen lamp, and it has a condenser lens system of plano-convex lenses, and finally a mirror there. That brings us to the last aspect of a slit lamp. There is a mechanical system. So all the mechanical systems in the slit lamp are essentially the joystick arrangement at the bottom of the slit lamp, which helps movements of the microscope and the illumination system towards and away from the patient and also side to side. Then the up and down arrangement, which is again on the joystick, and you just have to rotate the top part of the joystick via a screw device. Then there is a patient support system, a vertically movable chin rest, and an adjustable table height. So these are both to adjust the patient level as well as for the examiner to be as ergonomically doing a slit lamp examination as possible. And finally there is fixation target, which can be moved in X, Y and Z axis for the patient to fix on. There are filters, there is a white filter, there are cobalt, there is green, red free, diffuse filters for various different types of examinations. There is a projection lens, it forms the image of the slit at the eye. Its small diameter helps reduce aberrations and increases the depth of focus of the slit lamp. And finally, there are some slit lamps, not all of them have reflecting mirrors and prisms. So the mechanical system, the very important part over here for the slit lamp, how the quality of various slit lamp differs is how good the mechanical system is coupled. So the mechanical coupling of the microscope and the illumination system has to be good, because that allows the focusing at the same point as the illumination and the examination system. So the co-pivotal relationship between these two systems is very important for a slit lamp to be good and efficient. So how do you start? When you preparing the patient for examination is important. So before you start, of course, you have to introduce yourself, explain the procedure to the patient. If the patient is doing it for the first time, sometimes a bright light can be really startling to the patient. Seat the patient comfortably. Again, seat yourself comfortably. Never stand and examine. That can cause sometimes severe neck ache and can be really bad. Adjust the seat height, the table height. Ask the patient to rest against the chin and the forehead rest. Nowadays, in fact, there are these disposable tissue papers for chin, and because after an examination, sometimes the chin can get soiled, the chin rest can get soiled because of sweat at times. So that's why there are disposable papers which have to be removed every time you're doing an examination. So this is how you seat the patient. Remember, the forehead also has to be in contact over here. If the forehead is not in contact, then you will be trying to push the slit lamp forward, but will not get a focus. So these are the various parts of a slit lamp, a Haag Street type illumination, the various parts of a slit lamp over here. We'll in brief try and see each one of them as the presentation goes ahead. There is a filter and aperture out here. It's an open aperture. There's a heat absorption screen in some slit lamps. It's a plastic screen, which is a heat absorption screen. There are grey filters which filters about 10% of the light. There is a red-free filter, and there is an empty space for accommodating an additional filter also in some slit lamps. The Zeiss type illumination is from below. So again, the type of illumination differs. Now this is a illumination from below. There are some which have a turret on the top itself. This is again an illumination from below. These are the various parts of this CSO slit lamp. The eyepiece, you can see there's an eyepiece here. Now it's very important that you adjust the eyepiece. Both the eyepiece should ideally be equal when you're doing it. Many times what happens is if someone has been examining before you, one is on 0 and the other is on +2. And then you're not able to get a good binocular view and you're wondering why is that happening. So make sure that the eyepiece is adjusted properly. Also important is the interpupillary distance of every person differs of an examiner. So make sure that the interpupillary distance is adjusted. Again, if that's not adjusted, then you yourself will have diplopia and you will not get a binocular view. The magnification wheel is here on the side, so that to have your various steps of magnification. So every time you rotate this wheel, depending on the numbers here, you will get that much amount of magnification. Then there is a filter selector. So some slit lamps have a wheel like this, some of them have a knob. When that knob is rotated, you either get different filters, that is just the plain, a clear image, or a blue filter, or a red free filter, an amber filter. Say if you're doing an amblination tonometry, you put fluorescent, you need a cobalt blue filter. So there's a choice of filters in the slit lamp. You have the control lever out here. So when you turn the lever, you can raise and lower the instrument. Using this lever for focusing, and if you move it forward and backward and sideways, you can have your X and Y axis adjustments. And the stage can be used for bigger motions. There is a lock over here. It's very important that after you use the slit lamp, you lock it, and so that it does not move. There is a rheostat out here which controls the amount of brightness. Remember, like I said before, to be kind to the patient and use only as much light as is needed for examination. There is a base locking and arm locking knobs. So this is the arm locking knob here and a base locking knob to lock the entire mechanical system. The stage lock here is important when moving the slit lamp during patient setup. That is very important, because at times what happens, patient sits up, or suddenly gets up, and if you not lock the stage, then sometimes even the entire system can topple over. The slit width and height control you have here, the width of the slit and the height control. So very important that when you start off with the slit lamp, the hand should go towards the slit width, because so as to adjust the slit width. There you have a chin rest which can move up and down depending on where you want the height of the head of the patient. You have a slit rotation ring. The dial turns the slit beam and is used in adjusting contact lens rotation if you're doing contact lens fitting. After you finish, remember important, once your slit lamp examination is done, dim the illumination, switch off the slit lamp and lock the slit lamp. So in summary, when you're doing a slit lamp examination, important is this is your eyepiece to look in. You have to move the joystick forward and backwards for adjustment. Turn it on and off once you're done. So it's not really rocket science, it's as simple as that, but it's very important to follow the instructions properly. So that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pizza. Now I'll call upon Dr. Nayak to give his talk on anterior segment slit lamp examination, various techniques. Pointer.
Good morning, friends. First of all, I am thankful to Dr. Preetham for giving me this opportunity. Now in this, whatever he has said, one advice I will give you: whenever you buy a slit lamp, along with the slit lamp, always a operator manual is provided. Don't ignore it. Read it from the cover to cover. You will find a lot of information. Slit lamp is not simple, that just simple one instrument just like a torch or magnification. It has got wealth of information. You can do a lot of examination from this, but you must read the basics first. You must read the operator manual. That is true for any instrument that you buy, any equipment that you buy. So From there, I am going to discuss mainly the anterior segment examination, so various techniques. You can have a lot of information, these already you have seen that. Now there are various lighting systems or the methods that you have to utilize when you are examining the various structures that you want to examine. Diffuse illumination, focal illumination, recto illumination, specular, sclerotic, scatter and oscillation. Diffuse illumination is the probably least utilized on the slit lamp. In this, what is done that the diffuse light is thrown on the patient's eye. Generally, this gives you a general information, but it gives you a stereoscopic view because you are seeing it through microscope. And in this, there are two types of view, direct and tangential. Now this one, because usually we just simply throw the torch and examine, but on slit lamp also it can be done, and for this the technique is that large unfocused beam of light is thrown on the part of the examination, that part of eye that you are going to examine. And for this, the slit beam has to be fully open, so it has to be complete circle. And also there is a diffuser, which is you have to put a flap on this, which comes along with the slit lamp. So with that, if you put diffuser, then the diffuse light which goes there. And usually the microscope position is straight on, which is 0 degree, because you are examining straight. And in this, the system can be, sometimes you can also have, the illumination system will come from the side, which varies from the various part that you want to examine, which can be 30 to 50 degree. Now this is just the basic optics, that this is the illumination that you are throwing diffuse light, and through the microscope, your area of focus, you are examining a stereoscopic view, which is magnified. The main application is general survey of the anterior eye segment, general observation of the surface of the crystalline lens and cornea, assessment of the lacrimal reflex, assessment of soft contact lenses. It is used to examine entire surface of cornea, iris and lens. Useful in getting idea about scar, opacity in cornea, defaults, abnormal blood vessels in cornea, iris and corneal edema. But it's not that this will give you complete examination. So this will give you some idea. There are, say, opacity, I have written scar and opacity. If it is a very minute opacity, with this you will miss out completely. So the other method you have to use. Now the next, that was diffuse, then you have to come to the focal illumination. Focal, it can be direct focal illumination or indirect. The direct helps in visualization of the illuminated point and its adjacent area, done with broad beam or a narrow beam, which I will show you just now. Indirect focal examination allows to see the optical cut section of the anterior segment at any angle, and also permits the assessment of the depth of any structure. Now this is a narrow beam which is thrown there. So it is not a diffuse light which is going. It is now you are giving it a narrow beam and then focus light. Now one of the microscope in this slit lamp examination, that as he said, that usually it is par focus, means where the light is getting focused, illumination system, same place your observation system also is getting focused. But there are certain examination techniques where you have to dismantle this alignment. So that I will tell you later. But in this system, in this focal illumination, it has to be aligned, both at the same place. The beam of light is obliquely directed into the eye and focused and viewed from the side. Beam is of three types: optical section, parallelopiped or conical beam. The recommended settings are a narrow slit, angle of slit examination, illumination system can be 0 to 45 degree for reflected light.
We have to customize the techniques according to the situation to optimize the visual outcomes. Innovative and efficient machines like the Stellaris PC has truly revolutionized ophthalmic surgery and has enabled us to operating coexisting anterior and posterior segment disease with utmost ease. Now I have
observation of details is like what you can see, the stromal stria. For direct focal illumination with narrow slit, it has slit width has to be 0.1 to 0.3, magnification maximum. This is the most frequently used, and probably most of us simply go straight away to this examination. The angle between illumination and viewing path should be as large as possible, up to 90 degree, depends what you are going to examine. With a narrow slit, 0.1 to 0.2 mm and clear media, the image of the slit and object appear sharply focused at the same time. Slit width and magnification may be varied depending on the object to be examined, and brilliant optical section images to be obtained from the cornea through the rear face of the crystalline lens. Up to that level, you can get that optical section. The narrow slit or the light from the angle at 45 degrees used mainly for the cornea, and the various zone that you will see in the cornea, starting from the front over here, that you will see the layer of the tear film, then epithelium, then anterior stroma, the posterior stroma, and at the end you will see at the back descendants and the endothelium. different layers. You can see the pathology, that at what depth the pathology is going to be there. If you have to see the same thing for the lens, again, for the lens, the angle is little smaller. You have to make it approximately around 15 degree. And here again, you can have different portions in the cut section, slit optical sections like this. So you will get the anterior capsule, you will get the anterior portion of the nucleus, posterior part of the adult nucleus, then in between you will get the fetal nucleus, anterior and posterior. Sometimes you can also get which is adolescent nucleus, which is between adult and the fetal nucleus. You can get some images of the adult nucleus, the adolescent nucleus. So these are various depths that you can judge with the position of the nucleus, and then you can judge where is the opacity, where is the location, and what type of opacities you are seeing. The parallelepiped, again, this method slit is little wider. It's not to be very small, about 2 mm wide. In this examination, it is easier to examine the anterior and posterior surface of cornea for any irregularities. This is again probably not used very frequently, but it can be used so to know the anterior. It can give you full detail of the anterior and posterior surface of the cornea. But always this examination, you should do a little higher magnification. And if you want to see the corneal nerve, you can see with this examination with the very high magnification. The conical beam is the third part of that illumination. The circular beam is used to test the aqueous and flare. Usually, if you want to see the aqueous, whether flare or cells, then the conical beam is usually used. And you can also assess quantitatively as well as qualitatively, both. The main application for this method, suitable for assessment of cataracts, scars, nerves, vessels, etc., and observation by optical system, is also of great importance for the determination of the stabilization axis of toric contact lenses, which these days is becoming very popular. Indirect focal illumination, direct and indirect, is there what you saw, that whatever area you were examining, it was all getting same area getting focused with the illumination system, and that point you were examining. Now with indirect, with this method, the light enters the eye through a narrow to the medium slit to one side of the area to be examined. Here you are not throwing light where you have to examine the area. The light will go behind that and get reflected, and from that you will see the off axis. This light is over here, and so for this examination you have to dismantle the alignment of this the illumination system and the observation system. So there is a knob for that. So you disalign that, and then you can any angle and wherever you want to throw the light. Now in this, whatever light is coming from here, so you are observing the light coming from here, and then whatever the field area means of pathology you are seeing with this method. The main application for this examination is which is the objects in the direct vicinity of corneal areas of reduced transparency, is the infiltrates, corneal scars, deposits, epithelial or stromal defect. The illumination, or told you, narrow to medium slit width, decentered slit, which I explained to you earlier, and magnification depends whatever magnification you are comfortable with. The retro illumination is again very important examination, where it can be again direct and indirect. What it does, that uses an axial or biaxial light beam which shines into the pupil and reflects from the retina, getting reflected from the retina as a fundal glow. And against this fundal glow, you can see a lot of opacities, a lot of pathologies in the cornea or in the lens, means wherever it's in the media, which can be scars, cataracts, corneal vascularization, refractile bodies in anterior chamber, and defects like iris hole. These you can examine. Now here the light has to be focused behind. So that was the fundal glow. This one you can also get retroillumination from the surface of the iris or from the lens. And they utilize the fundus light. The angle between observation and illumination should be kept as small as possible. So both will be mainly, you can't keep exactly same, but more or less it will be close to zero. And if wherever the pathology that you want to see, the light illumination system should go away from there. If you are little away, you will get a better observation of the various pathologies. Light is going more or less similar angles, means not very too much. The angle is not much between the two. But if you want to see the pathology here, you go little away, because if you throw light from here, you won't be able to see anything. So throw the light here, all reflected red glow which you get against that background, you will see the pathologies in the cornea or the lens, wherever. Now this, as I said, that this reflection can be from the surface or from the fundus, from the retina, or also from the iris or the lens. So based on that, you can have different examinations, and usually whatever is known as the iris reflection is yellow field examination, and from the lens is the white field examination. When the surface you get from the eye, from the lens. Now here, the retroillumination, from the iris, all these pathologies on the cornea will shine through, and you can have that examination. The lens, again from the reflected light from the lens, but since the lens reflected light is white, that's why it's known as white field examination. And the retinal reflection, as you saw earlier, it was all red field. Now this one is probably most of us use this, that whenever you see, so suppose after cataract, in posterior capsular opacification, if you see on slit lamp, examine on slit lamp, the optical section, you will not be able to judge how much is the opacity and how much it can disturb the patient's visual disturbance. But if you see in retroillumination from the fundus, these bubbles will be, the moment you see these kind of things apparent, immediately you know that this is the culprit, why the vision is reduced so much. Similarly, even the cataract, you can know exactly what type of cataract the patient is having. So once you do the eye capsulotomy, you can see it's absolutely clear. So these pictures means you must utilize. But for this, preferable to dilate the pupil and then do that. Sclerotic scatter is again some examination method which is least utilized. Here what is done, the light is thrown onto the limbus from the side, and this what it does, the light from the two surfaces of the cornea gets total internal reflection, and that shines to the other side as well as the pathologies in the center. Means wherever in the cornea some transparent media, you can, through the examination system, you can observe. Here again, the two alignment has to be dismantled, the alignment of the illumination system and observation system. So that knob you must be aware that with which knob we can misalign these two systems. For some examination I said it needs alignment, in some examination it has to be misaligned. It is useful to detect the nebular, macular, interstitial deposits, scars, lines in the cornea, hemorrhage in the iris, structures of the sphincter, etc. And slit width it should be a little more. Magnification depends what you are usually comfortable with, and illumination maximum. Again, this is a similar example of that. Specular examination, again, this probably most of us don't do it, never do it, because we always think now because the specular microscopes are separate, so you have to go to that costly instrument and get the picture, the very good picture of endothelium. But believe me, you can do on all slit lamps, you can do this examination and you can have the assessment of the endothelium. What is the state of the endothelium, whether there are Hessel-Henle bodies or not, all those things can be very clearly depicted. For this, what you have to do, probably it's very difficult to explain over here how to do it, but what is basically based on the principle that when the light is thrown onto the cornea, then some of the light is refracted, and some of the light are reflected. Now some of the light which is refracted but in haphazard manner, so that property is utilized in seeing in the corneal endothelium. Now this the basic, just I'll tell you 2 or 3 points that make a parallelepiped of the cornea. Means not a very narrow slit beam, slightly broad. So the corneal parallelepiped that you see, where you can see the anterior surface, you can see the posterior surface. And between the observation system, and it has to be aligned, properly aligned, both. Between the observation system and illumination system, the angle has to be close to 60 degrees. Okay? And 60 degrees, light goes from here, patient is looking straight, bisecting your observation system and illumination system. So illumination system, observation system like this, patient is looking straight ahead, straight. Then a small parallelepiped with narrow beam, not very narrow beam, but slightly, means about 2 mm beam, you will see the corneal parallelepiped. You will also see a reflection onto the cornea of the bulb of the illumination system. Now, if the moment you align this to this, you come close, always use the highest magnification on the eyepiece. Highest magnification, turn it to the highest. Sometimes you have to change the eyepiece, go to the magnification highest, also change the eyepiece to increase more magnification. And then, the moment you align these, the image of the bulb and the parallelepiped, you will start seeing, just focus little anterior posterior, you will see endothelium, you will see the epithelium. Both you will see very clearly. And I can tell you, it's a treat to watch. Once you will see this, and there is no need to do routinely the corneal endothelial, the specular microscopy. Once you detect some abnormality, probably you can have more detailed study on that. In this also there are certain slit lamp which can provide you grid. With that grid matching, you can also count the rough estimate you will get what is the endothelial cell count in this. So this is just the theory written, but then whatever I explained, unfortunately I cannot really demonstrate over here, but this means it's probably sometimes you can try it yourself, whatever I have explained. Photograph wise, it comes a very bad picture because a very low illumination against a background which is dark. But then once the moment they miss the light, means once you take the picture, really doesn't show properly in this. It reveals endothelial mosaic and defects in them, elevation and depression in the anterior surface, folds, tears in Descemet membrane and its reduplication, details of precorneal fluid, can also reveal folds and thickening in anterior capsule. And lastly, the oscillatory examination, where the same thing is just like a slit beam, conical beam, but here, instead of keeping it steady, you have to keep on moving. Sometimes the flare and cells will be, and certain foreign bodies or some particles in the anterior chamber will be more apparent with this examination, where you slightly move it, means constantly go on moving and go on examining. Thank you very much for the patience.